What kinds of work are okay for Sabbath? A doctor, a nurse, and should you get paid?
All right. Several questions came in. Once we learned the Sabbath truth, people are wondering, well, what's appropriate to do or not to do on the Sabbath day? The Bible tells us Jesus said it's better to do good on the Sabbath day than evil. Did Jesus heal people on the Sabbath day? Yeah. Should Christians take care of the sick on the Sabbath day? Did Jesus ever get paid for healing people on the Sabbath day?
No.
You've got to be very careful. If you're involved in some emergency profession, such as a doctor or a nurse, where you're relieving suffering of humanity, we know that hospitals operate. Karen worked in a hospital you've worked in several hospitals, and sometimes by virtue of her scheduling, they scheduled her on Sabbath. She would not take the remuneration, or she'd dedicate it to some Christian project, and then would be very careful not to schedule other Sabbath work if at all possible. There's a lot of other people that do not appreciate God's commandment, and that's somewhere where you would apply the scripture that says, let the dead bury the dead. That doesn't mean for hospitals, of course. But I mean, if people are not going to honor the Sabbath day and they're going to be working anyway, you might adjust your schedule with some people who are not Bible Christians and say, look, Sabbath's very precious to me. If it's not to you, could we swap? And because if you get in the habit of working every Sabbath, what does that mean? You're not in church, right? And what happens if you start missing your fellowship and good preaching and the church experience? You've heard the saying, probably 7 days and no church makes 1 week. W-E-A-K. And so and then people say, well, what about if you're a policeman? Well, that's not an emergency. Handing out traffic tickets is not something that you really need to do on Sabbath. There's a fine line between some of these careers, and you need to pray that God will give you grace to know where to draw the line.
So the big picture is you don't want to, I'm a physical therapist, and I would have to work on Sabbath occasionally. But the big key is not to pick Sabbath as your regular work week day, your regular work day.
Yeah, it was just in emergencies where Karen did acute care and they needed to get some treatment. It was an emergency thing. Otherwise, we would schedule it for other days.
If possible, of course. Right.